Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I will be addressing the question as I was posed to me earlier, the extent of engagement of Islamic banking in finance with the Maqasid. How to evaluate whether we are applying the Maqasid, are we engaging meaningfully or not? There is so far a great deal of show of interest. And direct and indirect so far, and some initiatives were taken, but there is no method and strategy articulated as to how the Maqasid can be implemented into Islamic banking and finance. Of the several initiatives we can name, for example, we started in recent time Sharia governance framework, for example, in 2011. Sharia governance framework started with Sharia advisory, Sharia review, Sharia audit, Sharia research. You see from these naming that the interest mainly is with the established traditional fiqh, Sharia, as is come down to us. There is no reference as such to Maqasid in particular. We then had the VBI, value-based intermediation. This comes a bit closer to the Maqasid in the sense that it has 4 or 5 components. Sustainability, economy, society, environment, and profit. These are the kind of headings that the VBI consists of. You can say that economy, society, environment, these are of concern to the Maqasid. And if they are translated into Islamic banking and finance, that is a level of engagement. One must admit that it is not easy how you engage the Maqasid into the Islamic banking and finance in kind of measurable terms. You mention protection of religion, protection of life, protection of reason. What do you make of these Islamic banking and finance? You mentioned these two bank operation officer or decision maker. Maybe at the level of decision making, it is understandable that in policy it can be reflected. But in actual practice, in services and products, it is difficult how to articulate. Therefore, what we need is to take it a step further. A step further, for example, Islamic banking and finance proceeds on the level of all based on contracts. We have 6 or 7 contracts, Murabaha, Babisaman, Ajil, Musharaka, Mudaraba, etc., etc. If we identify what is the Maqsad Asli, for example, of this contract, and how can the banks engage that level of value or interest into their operations. And that may be one way, but even that may not be direct. This is two. The other is the level of Maqasid depends on the extent of understanding of the Maqasid themselves. Maqasid has gone a long way, especially in the sense the kind of explosion of interest in the historically neglected Maqasid, in the dominance of Usul al-Fiqh. The Maqasid were admittedly neglected. Only since 1980, the Maqasid has become there was a new and a special show of interest to articulate them. The Maqasid has, for example, how they are identified through in the text, or if there is no clear text, through ijtihad and rationality in what are the ijtihadi methods of identification of maqasid, the types of maqasid, daruri, haji, tahsini, maqasid al-shari, maqasid al-mukallaf, etc., etc. You have a jurisprudence of maqasid developing, that there is not really enough awareness and engagement, especially in the Islamic banking and finance. If you want meaningful, I think it is important. We have very pronounced criticism of the Muslim, population in Muslim countries, especially in recent decades, that the Islamic banks, even the other banks, let alone the other banks, they talk of Sharia and fiqh. All they do is they apply the fiqh rule, but without really taking care of the purpose of those rules. In all, to all intents and purposes, they break it. All they are about is they want profit, quick profit, regardless of the conditions of contract, whether there is a time requirement and this and that. Paper transaction, 10% plus, and that is the kind of practices that we have. You disengage. You tell me that you can disengage the bankers from profit by talking to him of maqasid. It doesn't work. Islamic finance means that you also, the profit and loss sharing is a real, an aspect that requires both sides to share profit and loss. But do the bank share loss? I think they don't share loss. They pass all the prospects of loss to the customer, and this is not really a meaningful engagement in Islamic, in Sharia, let alone the maqasid of Sharia. Therefore, I think what we need is to take that approach, identify the maqasid of certain contracts, and maybe find a method how we can meaningfully engage. This is important in order to curb the growing criticism that Islamic banking is following the same conventional banking method when it comes to treating the customer, when it comes to making quick profits and so on. Then also we find ways of engaging policy making into maqasid. This is perhaps an easier level. At the leadership level, you mentioned these value points, sustainability or protection of life and property and so on. And how do you articulate it? One is there should be, you need to work into maybe boil it down into some guidelines to make it practical for policymakers to engage meaningfully with the maqasid. And then what does it mean to the customer, to the of banks and Islamic banking and finance, and to generate this awareness? So far we listen, Maqasid is mentioned and thrown as a good measure, but we are not aware of it, in what ways the different parties are engaging. And then we ought to, if there is a realistic engagement, we ought to show that we are moving away from the spirit of the capitalist orientation, to move in the direction of Islamic economy, Islamic, the purposes, the Maqasid, Shari'ah are different. And this is, I think, we cannot claim that we have the Islamic banking and finances left behind the capitalist economic system. It is still there. We need to make a real step and show it and generate that awareness. I think that we have been talking, and there is it's very clearly stated that it is important that ijtihad moves along with the maqasid. There has been traditionally engagement with the maqasid has not been a part of the theory of ijtihad. We have neglected it. The fuqaha have neglected it. The fuqaha are interested in the interpretation of the text, the literalist meaning in this and that. Maqasid run away in different directions, and the fiqh scholars did not show interest in that. Now we say that ijtihad that does not engage, does not move along with the maqasid is deficient. We have accepted this. But have we accepted this generally? Whether the fatwa also moves, integrates the maqasid? Fatwa generally, yes, but I think some aspects of ijtihad like qiyas in analogy should have asal, far'a, illa, this and that. It'd be difficult to inject the kind of the maqasid dimension into fatwa, but we ought to be doing it. Now it is time that this maqasid has become, for decades we have been talking of Sharia as a Sharia governance framework and so on. But now we say that for us, the Sharia, the values are here. Now we work on this. And how do you articulate the maqasid? The traditional response given by some scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah, in Al-Shatibi, and Jasir Auda has also written in his book that ijtihad can be based on maqasid, especially if in ta'lil can be based on maqasid, especially if the maqsad is zahir, is munzabit. This is self-evident, and it is firm and constant and not changeable. Like when maqsad is given the clear text in the Quran, in Sunnah, we can base ijtihad in ta'lil on it. And this is something that a new dimension in our understanding, perhaps, of fatwa and ijtihad. I think that maybe I should stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.